Thank you and welcome.
Thanks. I want to tell Les before he steps aside that I really like his hairstyle. or like a friend of mine once said, it's not a hairstyle, it's a head style. It's not hairstyle. So, anyway. Glasses too. Okay.
Right, talk right into that mic. Close to the mic.
Okay, so, yeah, look, can you hear me in the back? Can you hear in the back, okay? Yeah? Okay. Well, it's nice to see everyone here tonight. Laughter and music will keep the mood light. I was inspired to share humor by my dear late dad because all the jokes he told truly weren't half bad. I dedicate this evening to who many of you knew as Morty, who loved to talk Celtics and Red Sox. He was indeed quite sporty. So let's get things started with the first joke to be told, and my mom will let me know if the humor fit his mold. So to start, I do have some good news and some other news. The good news is I do think over the next 45, 50 minutes or so, we'll probably share some laughs. The other news is I've never done this before. so really it's kind of a debut of sorts. And you know, when I come and visit, and I always enjoy doing so, of course, to see my mom. I love the Jack Satter house and all her friends here, and I usually tell a couple of jokes over at the table, you know. And I told my mom, I said, you know, if I ever get about a dozen of these put together, maybe I can share them with all your friends. So that's kind of how this came to be. But it's a great spot, right? I mean, you're right on the water. You have a beautiful view of the ocean. All I need now is some postcards, and I can just write on them, you know, the weather's beautiful, wish you were here. Except to, like my brother Steve here, because of the sibling rivalry, his postcard will say, the weather's here, wish you were beautiful. So anyway, so when I moved to New York, and I was teaching high school, you know, the high school students, they'll razz you about anything they can think of. So it was the Boston accent, because I really used to park the car. You don't pronounce the R's. Yeah, I Massachusetts to Long Island. It's like the two worst regional dialects you could possibly put together. Anyway, so I tell people I used to park the car. Then I moved to New York, and I learned how to park the car, but I'll never park the car. Never park the car. So anyway, it's really funny. Once you put a baton in your hand, I cannot tell you how many times, and this is true, that people have asked me, "Oh, you conduct? Do you play an instrument?" And it's always really funny to me because it kind of doesn't do any justice to dispel the myth that all conductors do is, you know, stand up there and wave a stick. You know, like, well, I sure as heck I hope I play an instrument. My major instrument is saxophone. But my first instrument was piano. So there is going to be audience participation tonight, one of which towards the end will be if you have some jokes that you'd like to share. I think that'd be nice for everybody here and maybe give you some repertoire for some other time, some other plays. But anyway, the first thing I'm going to do, turn the piano on here, is well, you can sing along. But we're going to play Name That Tune. I'm going to play 4 beats, and they're going to be really fast. They're about that tempo. But I'm convinced that more than just a few of you will know this piece just in those 4 beats. So just call it out, and then sing along. All right. So here are the 4 beats. I heard it. Abanagio. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you fly up. Okay. So just sing along. Abanagio.
Where is she?
So, when I moved to New York in Long Island, of course I moved to a really, just generally speaking, a very large Jewish community. Anybody ever live on Long Island? I lived in Nassau County. That's the county closer to the city, Nassau and Suffolk County. All the rich folks live down, the richer folks live down in Suffolk County, but the Hamptons and all that. But anyway, I lived in a town called Glen Cove, and I taught in Port Washington. And it was really wild because seemingly on every corner, there was a bagel shop and a nail salon. And I never saw anything like it. And all the women, they wore red and pink nail polish. When I was in Seattle, of course, it was Starbucks. Or as everybody called it there, $5, because you can't get out of there without paying $5 or something. But anyway, so bagel stores and nail salons. So that reminds me of this joke. You can find bagels just about anywhere in New York, including on the streets, like where they sell. They have the carts for hot dogs and pretzels, and so there's this elderly Jewish woman selling bagels on the street right outside the subway. When you go down the steps into the subway. So you put a quarter in the can, you take a bagel off the stick. Simple as that. So there was this Wall Street guy came by every day in his 3-piece pinstripe suit, and he would put a quarter in the can, go down the steps, and not take a bagel. Day after day, week after week, quarter in the can, down the steps, never took a bagel. So another week approaches, just like any other. On Monday, he puts the quarter in the can, goes down the steps, doesn't take the bagel. But this time, the little old Jewish woman follows him down the steps, taps him on the shoulder, and says, "Mister, I want to talk with you." He says, yeah, I know. You want to know why day after day, week after week, I put a quarter in the can, I got on the steps, and I don't take a bagel. She goes, "No, that's not what bothers me. Just you should know, bagels are now 50 cents. So this fellow named Rodney did not do well in high school in his math class. And he failed math. And the principal told him, "Rodney, you can't graduate with your class. You didn't, pass the requirement." Well, the graduation came in a big auditorium, and Rodney was in the back, still pleading his case to the principal. "Mr. Principal, can I graduate with my class?" And the principal said, "No, Rodney, you can't graduate. You did not pass the exam." And the whole class said, "Give Rodney a chance. Give him a chance." So I said, "Okay, Rodney, I'll give you a chance. If you get this math question correct, you may graduate with your class." So he says, "Rodney, what is 8 plus 5? Rodney says, "Mr. Principal, 8 plus 5 is 11. He said, "No, Rodney, I'm sorry. That is the incorrect answer. You may not graduate with your class." And the class says, "Give Rodney another chance. Give him another chance." I said, "All right, Rodney, another chance. What is 7 plus 8? He said, "Mr. Principal, 7 plus 8 is 16. He said, no, Ronnie, I'm sorry, that is not the correct answer, and you may not graduate with the class. And they say, give him another chance. Give Rodney another chance. Says, all right, Rodney, 3 strikes and you're out. If you don't get this one correct, again, you may not graduate with your class. Said, Rodney, what is 8 plus 4? Said, Mr. Principal, 8 plus 4 is 12. And the class says, give Rodney another chance. Give him another chance. So then yeah, I don't know where that school was, but so then Rodney goes out in the community and he says, I'm going to try community theater. He never was in community theater in high school, but you know, there's a community theater in the town, and he auditions and he gets a small part. It's a speaking part, but it's just one line. And the line is, hark, I hear the cannon boom. That's it. So he goes to every rehearsal, and he keeps trying with his voice and projecting it and changing the tone. And opening night comes, and he's sweating like there's no tomorrow. And he's all itchy, and he's nervous, and stage fright. He's backstage practicing. Hark, I hear the cannon boom. Hark, I hear the cannon. Hark, I hear the cannon boom. Finally, it comes his time, and the stage light goes on, and the spotlight goes on, and they push him out, and they go, now! And he hears, boom! He says, what the hell is that? So Rodney has brother Bobby, okay? So Bobby gets into high school a couple years later, and he's not a great student either. And he wants to get, you know, he goes through his first, second, third year of high school and wants to maybe get a football scholarship. He played on a football team and he did pretty well there, not so much in the classroom. So the football coach said, well, I think I can help you get a scholarship, but you have to take this placement test. And he goes, I don't know, coach, I'm not too good at DC and tests. He said, it's just 3 questions, and you only have to get 1 right. He said, you have 3 hours to take the test. He said, first question, how many days in the week start with the letter T? So he writes it down. Second question, how many seconds are there in a year? He says, coach, I'm not good at DC and math questions. He said, just write it down. You got 3 hours. I said, okay, how many seconds are there in a year? Third question, how many D's are there in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? So he writes that one down. He says, okay, I'll be back in 3 hours. Go. So he starts doing, he's writing and he's stretching out, he's erasing, he's getting itchy and sweaty just like his old brother did. And 3 hours goes by and he comes back and the coach says, okay, time is up, pencil down. He said, how'd you do? He goes, well, I had a tough time with this year test, but I think I've done good on these 3 questions. He goes, good, let's go over them. How many days in the week start with the letter T? He said, simple, 2. He goes, good, what are they? He said, today and tomorrow. I said, no. Well, let's go on to the next one. He said, with this math question. How many seconds are there in a year? He goes, that one was pretty easy too, coach. He goes, well, how many? He said 12. He goes, 12? There's more seconds in a minute than that. How do you get 12 seconds in a year? It says the 2nd of January, the 2nd of February. He goes, that's not what they were going for in the standardized test. He said, well, how'd you do on the 3rd question? He goes, coach, if there's one question I got right, it's this year, 3rd question. He goes, good, let's go over it. How many D's are there in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer? He said, 152. I said, how the heck did you get 152? He said, simple. Okay, now, another teacher joke. This is Mrs. Smith. She teaches 4th grade. Okay? And the class isn't paying really good attention one day. She's at her wit's end what to do. She doesn't usually like to do this kind of thing, but she said, well, it's the last resort. So she holds up a $1 bill. And Now everybody's in the fourth grade class paying attention. And she says, whoever gets this next question correct can keep this dollar bill. So she asks the question, who is the most important figure in the history of the world? So the hands go up. She calls on Tony Annunziata. And she says, Anthony, who is the most important figure in the history of the world? And he says, President George Washington, because he is the founding father of our country. Mrs. Smith says, well, you know, that's a very good answer, and of course we should remember President Washington, but no, he is not the most important figure in the history of the world. And she calls on Jimmy O'Brien, Irish boy in the class. Said, James, who is the most important figure in the history of the world? He said, President Abraham Lincoln, because he put an end to slavery. And she said, you know, just like your classmate Anthony, it's a very good answer, and just like President Washington, we should remember President Abraham Lincoln in the annals of our country's history, but no, he is not the most important figure in the history of the world. Then she calls on Benny Goldstein. And she said, Benjamin, who is the most important figure in the history of the world? He said, Jesus Christ. And she said, that's right. She goes, but to be honest, Benjamin, I thought coming from you, you would have said Moses. He goes, well, of course we know it's Moses, but business is business. It's, my mom and dad raised us on Bainbridge Street in Malden. And they kept a kosher home, as my mom does upstairs here too. So separate silverware, separate dishes for meat, dairy, and cups and glasses. But when I was, again, that high or that small, I didn't know about the whole kosher separation and the Jewish tradition and the kosher home. So all I knew was if there was a steak knife in the sink and I put an ice cream scoop in there at the same time, I got yelled at, or my brothers, but we would get yelled at, and one of those utensils would be buried in the backyard and never be used again. That's all I knew. That's all I knew. You mix it, you get yelled at, it gets buried. This is all I knew. So one day after school, a neighborhood friend was over visiting Kenny Johnson. Wasn't one of the Jewish neighbors, obviously, Kenneth Johnson. But we were having ice cream. It's like a nice kid. At the time, he went to take that ice cream scoop, or the ice cream dish, and he put it in the sink. But there was a steak knife in there. So now I just figured this happened at everybody's house. I didn't know the whole Jewish. I just started yelling at him. What the hell are you doing? He goes, what? I'm trying to clean up after him. Be a good kid, clean up after him, put the dishes in. I said, don't you see the steak knife in there? Now we're going to go bury it in the backyard. He's looking at me. I got 10 minutes. You know? It's a true story. True story. Play an introduction, call out, I think you'll get it just by the intro, and then certainly sing along. But call it out when you recognize it, and again, I think more than one of you will. Yeah, I heard it.
Over the rainbow.
You got it. Here we go. Sing along if you like.
Once in a while, and I over the rainbow.
because I saw this movie in the theaters. I thought it was really funny. It was a romantic comedy called Splash with Tom Hanks, John Candy, and Daryl Hannah. You see that movie? Okay, my friends didn't like it. I thought it was, because I was a huge John Candy fan. I thought it was really, really funny. Got a slapstick comedy. And I got all my buddies to come over on a Friday night to watch it. I got popcorn and all this. And they thought I was the biggest goofball, you know? So they throwing popcorn at me. But there was this one scene, tell me if you remember it, where Tom Hanks was waiting for a elevator. And there was a bank of elevators on this side, a bank of elevators on this side, because he had to go and find Daryl Hannah or the mermaid or whatever her name was. What was her name? Madison. And he didn't know which bank was going to open first, so he was like this. He was like this, right? Because he didn't know which way he was going to run first. Well, that reminds me of this story, two interesting stories. The second one, I guarantee, will be the best dog story, true dog story you've ever heard. But we had a dog, we had a few dogs actually, but our last and best one was a half collie, half shepherd named Maggie. And I used to, this was really mean, but it was kind of funny, but probably pretty mean to the dog. Because she'd get really, how many of us have had dogs at one time or another? Okay, so you'll be able to relate to this, especially. I'm not as big a cat fan. When they say dogs have owners and cats have staff, right?
Right.
Or the other one is that, a dog looks at the owner and says, look at this person feeds me, this person cleans up after me, this person takes me to the vet, takes care of me, takes me outside, this person must be God. The cat says the same thing, except at the end, the cat says, I must be God. Right? There's a difference between dogs and cats. But anyway, with Maggie, she'd get real excited whether she was going to go outside in the backyard, whether she was going to have dinner, whether she was going to go for a walk, or especially a ride in a car. So I used to say to her, hey Maggie, do you wanna, and she'd do that Tom Hanks thing. Because she knew she was about to get really excited about something. But she didn't, and depending what I was going to say would depend where she would run. So she didn't know which door and which, the front hall, the back, the boom, the car, the leash, where are we going? So I'd say, Maggie, do you want to go? And then it's either eat outside for a walk or for a ride. So it reminded me of that Tom Hanks scene. But how we got the dog is classic. It's a classic story. When I was really young, when I was 8 in second grade, we had a standard-sized poodle, one of those real big poodles, very well house-trained, but very short-tempered, very turf-oriented. So Rocky was his name, way before the movies, and he would snap. He would bite, and I was the last victim. That part of the story shorter, we had to get rid of that. We had to get rid of that dog. And a couple came to take it. I remember like it was yesterday. I still feel bad in a way because they didn't have any children. The husband and wife came and they tried to get the dog to heel, to come onto the porch. Rocky was pulling back. The other he knew he wasn't coming back. So I still kind of feel bad about that. But then we got another dog. It was a mix named Tevye. We named it Tevye. We couldn't even have. We got a professional trainer. Nothing worked. Had to get rid of that dog. My parents said, "That's it. No more dogs." Well, we were still 4 young boys, and we really wanted a pet. Me and my 3 brothers, from this part of the story on, we all have different variations, but this is how I remember it. There was a carnival. There used to be a carnival in the back parking lot of the Malden Armory, right across from Pine Banks. And I was down there one day in the summer, and there was a guy that had a big bucket, like one of those big trash barrels, and he had these cards in them. And some cards were blank, and other cards had these words written on them: gerbil, hamster, turtle, goldfish, and he had all of these behind him. And there were a lot of blank cards, and you give him like $2. And if you pull out a card that says goldfish, you get a goldfish. If you pull out a card that says hamster, you get a hamster. If you pull out a blank, which probably the majority of them were, you wouldn't get anything. And there was this one huge empty fish tank with this little puppy running back and forth. So I go home and I tell my brothers about this, and I said, hey, you think if we call Mom and Dad up at Dad's store, the Alford Smoke Shop in Lynn, right, on Union Street there for so many years, I said, maybe we can all chip in and we'll go down and between the four of us, we'll try about, I don't know, a dozen chances, right? We'll all chip in. And if maybe they'll let us keep the dog. So my brother Steve calls up my parents and tells them the story. My mother said, like, say, Morty, you know, we're not going to do it. You know, we told them no more dogs. And my father was like, Cynthia, what are you worrying about? There's probably only one tag in there that says dog. They're not going to win the dog. We're going to have fun at the carnival. So my oldest brother Steve is here tonight. Had his first car at the time. It was a 1963 Rambler. And we all got in the car and we're heading down to the armory, to the carnival. We get halfway down. He turns around. He's doing a U-turn, going the opposite direction. We said, "What are you doing?" We had collected about, I don't know, maybe $15, $20 between the four of us. So what are you doing? The armory's this way. He said, "Trust me." So he goes down Mullen Square and pulls up to the pet store. And $15 later, we come home with a dog. And we call my parents and we say, "Guess what? We won." True story. And here's the interesting part. My dad was day to day was the more strict disciplinarian. But we just knew that if we told my mother the truth, that dog would be out the next day. But Dad would be okay with it. So we told our father, and we kept a joke with my mom that we wanted it at the carnival for a year. And then my brother Larry said, "Mom, I think," because now I actually love the dog. She just said, she said, a year later we said, "We think it's about time we told you the truth about Maggie." We had that dog from the time I was 11 until I was 24. The dog lived 13 years and then had a stroke and just so the kicker is when it came time to sign the release to put the dog down. Everybody was at work except my mom was home. She had to sign that the release. But that was a true story.
Good story.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a real good one.
Good story.
Okay, so about dogs. So here's a good dog joke. These two boys are playing. It's in the wintertime. They're playing hockey on this rink at the downtown Boston Common. And this Rottweiler starts running after one of the boys. And the other boy comes because it looks like he's going to attack his friend. And the other boy goes and wedges the hockey stick between the dog's neck and the collar. And basically, the dog died, broke his neck, but he saved his friend or his cousin, whoever he was with. Just at that time, there was a Boston Globe reporter, happened to actually end up being a sports reporter, walks by, and he writes on his pad, he says, "Boston Bruins fan saves his friend from certain death." And he said, no, I'm not a Bruins fan. So he flips his pad over and he said, "Boston Celtics fan saves his friend from certain demise." He said, no, I'm not a Celtics fan either. He goes, "Well, what kind of fan are you?" He said, "That's my cousin." He said, "I'm from New York." He flips his pad over. He says, "Moron New York sports fan kills beloved family pet." So it was really interesting, I remember my dad. It was a great day when I finally finished, my defense of my doctoral dissertation. I think it was 2008. My parents came out for the commencement in Seattle. My dad, he was didn't wear his emotions on his sleeve, but so when he did, you remember those times, with a lot of fondness. And he said to me, "Mitchell," he said, "I'm so proud. The buttons are popping off my vest, when I got that doctorate." Now, of course, getting a doctorate as an instrumental conductor with a baton versus a doctor with a scalpel, we're talking two different types of doctorates, right? But it does remind me of this next joke that, of course, as you know, 2 elections ago, our country celebrated history in the making with the election of our first African-American president. So this story is looking futuristically down the road. One day, which I believe will come, when there will be a Jewish-born president elected. I believe it, maybe not in our lifetime. not mine or yours, but anyway, so let's just go there for a minute. And he's elected, and he of course calls his mother, tells her when the inauguration date is, that she has to come. She says, I gotta come, it's gonna be in January, it's gonna be so cold, and I gotta walk, and I'm not gonna be comfortable, and I gotta sit there for so long. He said, Mama, this is history in the making. Our country's first Jewish American president, and it's your son. Don't worry, I'll have the Secret Service there, they'll have extra blankets for you, they'll take you out on the, rotunda, no problem. She goes, all right, if you want me there, I'll come. What am I going to do? So the day comes, and lo and behold, it's very cold, very, very cold in January. But like he said, the Secret Service is there, they bundle her up, they take her up, they sit her down next to all these dignitaries, and he's up there taking the oath of office. And she's brimming with pride, and she elbows the dignitary sitting next to her, and she said, you see that boy up there? You know his brother's a doctor? All right, so this next tune, again, sing along with it. I'll just give you the title, and we'll go right into it. You Are My Sunshine.
When sky does rain,
You never know, dear, how much I love you. You'll take my sunshine away. Got the light as I sleep. I have one thing that was the same. So if I
Where are the men in here? The men are outnumbered. And I really think the men will like this. Maybe I don't know. I'm going down a dangerous path here, but I shall. So anyway, this gentleman is taking care of his yard work, and in the backyard he's raking leaves, and he comes upon this genie's bottle, and he blows the dust off of it, rubs it a little bit, and out pops a genie. And the genie says, yeah, look, pal, I know. You see me, I'm a genie, I'm out of the bottle, you think you're going to get 3 wishes. Well, I'm really close to retirement, the genie says, so I can give you one good one, but not 3. And he says, okay, he says, I want a bridge built from California over the ocean to Hawaii. And the genie looks at me and says, now come on. He says, I know I told you I'd give you one good one, because he says, you know how many man-hours that's going to take? But the pylons all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, and then we got to take into account if there's an earthquake, whether it's going to be a suspension bridge, and so many miles. Man, I know I told you I could give you one good one, but a highway and a bridge from California to Hawaii, I'm sorry, pal, you got to come up with another wish. So he says, all right. So he scratches his chin and he says, I got it. He says, I want to know what makes women tick. I want to know what pleases them. I want to know what I have to do so they don't nag. What makes women tick? And the genie scratches his chin and says, you want 2 or 4 lanes on that highway?